Hello and welcome. I'm Professor RJ Starr. Do you remember the television series Gilmore Girls? It's an amazing show. There's a moment in Gilmore Girls, season 2, episode 8, that doesn't get quoted as often as the big dramatic declarations or the witty one-liners, but it has stayed with me. It's quiet, intimate, almost easy to miss. But if you've ever loved a place more than the people you were supposed to belong to, if you've ever lost a space that held you in a way no one else did, then this moment might feel like it was written just for you. Let me set it up. Lorelai Gilmore has just found out that Mia, her longtime mentor and the owner of the Independence Inn, she's planning to sell the inn, the very building where Lorelai raised her daughter, rebuilt her life, and carved out a sense of self, far away from the cold, rigid world of her parents. The news of the sale hits her harder than she expects. Later that day, she finds herself sitting with Luke, trying to make sense of the feelings coming up. He gestures toward her house and says, "This is your home." But Lorelai shakes her head. She says something that catches in the throat a little bit. "No, the inn, that was my home, my memory home. It's where Rory took her first steps, where I took mine." And then she says the part that opens the door to today's conversation. "It's more of a home to me than my parents' house ever was."
Hello and welcome to The Psychology of Us with Professor RJ Starr, where we explore the mind's influence on life, relationships, and society. RJ Starr is an existential psychologist, professor, and author dedicated to exploring the core challenges of human existence, how we find meaning, embrace responsibility, and navigate life's challenges. Known for a thought-provoking yet accessible approach, RJ inspires listeners to cultivate self-awareness, emotional intelligence, authenticity, and purpose. This podcast is designed for all psychology enthusiasts, practitioners, students, and anyone curious about why we think, feel, and behave the way we do. Each episode unpacks theories, explores complex questions, and offers insights that deepen understanding of the human experience. So settle in, stay curious, and discover the psychology of us.
Today, we're talking about the memory home. Not the house you list on your driver's license, not the place where your mail goes, but the place where you grew, emotionally, spiritually, maybe physically. The place that gave you refuge when nothing else made sense. The place where something clicked and you began to feel like you. That's what Lorelai is grieving in that moment with Luke. Not walls, not floorboards, but meaning, memory, safety, belonging. For many people, the idea of home is complicated. Some of us never felt safe in the houses we were raised in. Some of us have moved so many times that home itself has become a blurry concept. Some of us left home early to survive. Others built home for ourselves later, brick by emotional brick. And some of us are still searching. The psychology of home is far richer than most people realize. It's about more than comfort. It's about identity, security, a sense of self that extends beyond our own skin. The concept of place attachment, a field of research within environmental psychology, it explores how emotional bonds form between people in physical spaces. And those bonds can become so central to our inner world that the loss of a home, even if it's just symbolic, can register in the nervous system as grief. That's what Lorelai is describing in that scene. She's afraid of losing her memory home, and she's not alone in that fear. Whether it was a grandmother's kitchen, the dance studio where you felt free, a best friend's bedroom with glow-in-the-dark stars on the ceiling, or the inn where you rebuilt your life. When that space is threatened or lost, it can feel like losing a version of yourself. And there's often no ritual for that kind of grief, no goodbye, no acknowledgement. You're just untethered, adrift, expected to move on without mourning or grieving. But today, we're going to pause and give that space because this conversation matters, not just for those who have lost their memory home, but for those still building one or longing for one or trying to understand why they've never quite felt at home in their own story. We'll talk about the psychology behind our longing for home, the emotional significance of places that hold memory, and what it means to reclaim a sense of belonging when the structures that once held us are no longer there. We'll explore the ache of displacement, the healing power of building rootedness later in life, and why some homes stay with us even after they're gone. And maybe, just maybe, we'll start to realize that while the physical space can vanish, the emotional truth of what it gave us, that can still be carried forward. A memory home is not always the place you live. It's the place that lives inside of you. It's the place you go to in your mind when you need to feel safe. It's where your laughter echoes the loudest. It's where you remember who you were before the world started shaping you into who you were supposed to be. Some memory homes are soft, quiet places, like a corner of a library or a grandmother's kitchen. Others are bustling, alive, like a diner where your first real friend worked, or the dorm room where you finally admitted who you were. The details vary, but the feeling is the same. When you were there, you felt held. In psychology, we often talk about place attachment, a bond that forms between a person and a location that provides emotional security or identity or continuity. This is not a superficial fondness. It's a deep, meaningful connection that shapes how we see ourselves and how we experience the world. Place attachment doesn't require ownership. You don't have to possess a place to belong to it. Sometimes the most powerful memory homes were never ours legally or permanently. They were borrowed spaces, temporary sanctuaries, but they were ours in the ways that mattered. For Lorelai, in Gilmore Girls, the Independence Inn was that place. It wasn't just where she worked. It was where she arrived as a young, single mother with nothing but her daughter and her will to start again. It was where she found community, responsibility, and dignity on her own terms. She wasn't someone's daughter there. She wasn't someone's disappointment. She was someone. She built something. She belonged. And when Mia announced that she might sell the inn, it wasn't just a business transaction. It was an existential tremor, a quiet panic that the place holding all her memories, all her milestones, all the proof of who she had become might be erased, not just closed, erased. That fear is profoundly human. Some of us are carrying around invisible blueprints of places that shaped us. We might drive past an old apartment building and feel a tug in our chest. I remember driving past my grandmother's condominium in Miami several times and feeling that longing ache to go and open the door. We might smell a certain kind of wood or hear a creaking floor and feel like we've time traveled back to when life was simpler, or at least when it felt like we had a place, a tether. And then when those places are gone, or remodeled, or repurposed, or sold to someone who doesn't know what they meant, it's not just the place we grieve. It's the version of ourselves that lived there, that younger self, that hopeful self, that beginning. This is what we mean when we talk about a memory home. It's a place that holds part of our identity, a place that becomes part of our internal landscape. And when you lose that place, or when it becomes inaccessible, it can trigger what psychologists call symbolic loss. This isn't the loss of a person or an object, it's the loss of meaning, of grounding, of continuity. And here's the thing we rarely say out loud. Symbolic loss can hurt just as much as tangible loss. Sometimes even more, because there's no funeral, no goodbye, no closing, no permission to grieve. People might look at you strangely if you say you're devastated that a building was torn down, or a neighborhood changed, or a little yellow house in the corner was repainted and sold. But those are real. Those are real feelings. They are evidence that we don't just form relationships with people. We form relationships with place, with time, with meaning. And when those relationships are disrupted, it unsettles us. It makes us feel unmoored, as if the pages of our story have been torn out and scattered. So if you've ever felt that, you are not alone. If you've ever lost a place that was never just a place to you, then you know. Lorelai grew up in a world of manicured lawns, grand dining rooms, and private clubs. Her parents, Emily and Richard, were part of that old money East Coast world where appearances mattered more than emotional warmth. Her childhood home may have had crystal chandeliers and trust funds, but it lacked something more essential: safety, softness, unconditionality, unconditional acceptance. By the time Lorelai was 16, she was pregnant, terrified, and desperate to leave behind the suffocating expectations of that life. So she ran. She took her baby Rory, and found her way to Stars Hollow, a town full of quirks and characters, and most importantly, room to begin again. And Mia, the owner of the Independence Inn, took her in. Let's pause there because it matters. Mia didn't just offer Lorelai a job, she gave her something few people had ever offered her before: trust. Not conditional on behavior, not tied to status, just trust. And what Lorelai built in that inn wasn't just a career, it was a life entirely separate from her parents' influence, a life she could claim as her own. While there, she moved up through the ranks, chambermaid to executive manager. She raised her daughter Rory in the corners of that inn. Birthday parties, first steps, early mornings, late nights, all of it happened there. And in the process, the Independence Inn stopped being a workplace. It became a memory home. When Lorelai says to Luke, "It's more of a home to me than my parents' house ever was," she's naming a truth many people never get the chance to articulate. That home isn't defined by bloodline or deed. It's defined by meaning, by emotional truth, by how safe you felt to be exactly who you were. This is where the psychological concept of earned secure attachment comes in. For those who didn't receive secure attachment in childhood, meaning warmth, reliability, responsiveness from their primary caregivers, it's still possible to earn that security later in life through new, reparative experiences. Lorelai didn't get that sense of belonging from Emily and Richard, but she found it in the hallways and the back rooms of the Independence Inn. She found it in the quiet affirmations of Mia's mentorship. She found it in the daily routine of building something of her own. And because she earned that sense of stability and emotional trust in that space, the inn wasn't just a symbol of her independence, it became the evidence of her healing. That's why the potential sale of the inn is so destabilizing. It's not about the logistics of a real estate deal. It's about memory, identity, legacy. It's about losing the one place that held all the layers of her story, the before and the after, the scared teenage girl and the capable adult woman. In trauma-informed psychology, we talk about the coherence of narrative, how important it is for people to be able to tell their life story in a way that makes emotional sense. The Independence Inn isn't just a physical setting in Lorelai's narrative, it's the spine of it. Take it away, and the rest of the story wobbles. Luke doesn't quite understand that at first. He sees her house, her porch, her routine, and he tries to reassure her, saying, "This is your home." But Lorelai isn't talking about property. She's talking about placement, about where her story lives, where she became her. There's something very tender and very common about that disconnect. How often do people around us try to reassure us from the outside in without understanding what's happening from the inside out? Lorelai isn't being sentimental. She's being honest. She's grieving not the loss of the building, but the threat of losing the one place that ever gave her the freedom to define her own life. And for those of us who've walked a similar path, who've left behind rigid family systems, or started over in strange towns, or found healing in unexpected corners, that fear hits close to home. What happens when the place that made you disappears? What do you do when the space that held your growth is no longer there to return to? Those are the questions Lorelai is sitting with in that scene. And they're the same questions many of us are forced to wrestle with as we move through life and time. So what happens to the psyche when memory home is lost? What kind of grief does that create? What kind of disorientation? And how do we process emotional homelessness in a world that rarely acknowledges it? What happens when your memory home disappears? That question is at the heart of a very quiet kind of suffering, a form of displacement that often goes unnamed. We usually reserve the word displacement for major events: refugees, war zones, natural disasters, economic eviction. But psychological displacement is something that can happen in the softest ways. You don't have to be forced out of a space to feel like you no longer belong there. It sometimes it just changes. Sometimes it's sold. Sometimes it burns down. And sometimes you come back to it years later and realize it no longer knows your name. In Lorelai's case, the fear isn't just about change, it's about erasure. If the Independence Inn is sold, remodeled, renamed, turned into something else, then where does her story live? Where does she go to feel grounded when the world feels too fast or too uncertain or too heavy? The inn is a compass point in her life. Its potential loss doesn't just move her, it unmoors her. Psychologically, we are wired for place. We are embodied creatures. We develop our memories in relationship to our environments. When you think back on pivotal moments, your first kiss, a loss, a realization, it's likely anchored to a space, a color, a smell, a room. That spatial connection isn't incidental, it's neurological. Our hippocampus, that's the part of our brain responsible for memory and spatial orientation. The hippocampus stores experience in place. That's why you can walk into a childhood classroom or a long-lost friend's kitchen and be flooded with emotion before you even know why. The memory lives in the place. And when the place is lost, the memory feels like it floats. It becomes harder to hold, harder to access, harder to feel real. This is what we call ambiguous loss, a form of grief that doesn't have clear boundaries. The person or place may still exist in some form, but not in the way it once did. And that makes mourning difficult. This kind of emotional displacement can be especially painful for people whose sense of home was already fragile. Children of divorce who never had one consistent bedroom. Gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender, queer plus individuals who had to leave home in order to live openly. Survivors of abuse whose childhood homes were places of fear, not safety. People who moved constantly due to military service or economic instability. The loss of a memory home for these individuals isn't just sad. It can feel like a kind of internal collapse. Because memory homes don't just hold the past, they stabilize the self. When Lorelai grieves the possible loss of the inn, she's not just sad that a chapter of her life is ending. She's afraid of fragmentation, afraid that the narrative she built, the identity she earned, might unravel if the place it was built in no longer exists. That's a fear many people carry silently, and it can show up in strange ways. Some people revisit the old neighborhood obsessively, hoping to catch a glimpse of something familiar. Others avoid it completely, afraid that seeing it changed will be too much to bear. Some people try to recreate it through decor, through food, through rituals. And others carry the ache like a scar, something that only stings when you press on it too hard.
In all these responses, the psyche is trying to do one thing: hold on to meaning, protect identity, anchor memory.
Because when home is gone, really gone, it can feel like your story has nowhere to live. And this can lead to what we call in psychology narrative dislocation, a disorientation in the self that comes when there's no clear framework to place your life within. Narrative dislocation. Without the grounding presence of a memory home, some people feel lost, not just emotionally, but existentially. Who am I if I don't have that place to return to? What holds the parts of me together? This is especially hard in a culture that often tells us to move on, let go, or be grateful for the memories. Everyone has an opinion, right? But memory, untethered from place, can sometimes feel like mist, beautiful, but impossible to grasp. And gratitude doesn't always fill the void. So what do we do when the place that held us is gone? How do we grieve a space without walls? How do we process the ache of displacement when no one around us sees it as a loss? These are hard questions, yes, but they're not hopeless ones. Because even if the physical space is lost, the meaning doesn't have to be. Even if the building is gone, the sense of self you built inside it can remain. When people think of home, they often picture something static: a childhood house, a town where their roots go deep, a place that never changes. But for many of us, home isn't something we inherit. It's something we assemble over time, from fragments, from memory, from meaning. We piece it together slowly, in moments of truth, in relationships that feel safe, in places where we're finally allowed to exhale. Psychologically, this is a powerful act, because to create a sense of home later in life is to reclaim authorship over your story. It's to say, I may not have been given a soft beginning, but I will carve out a soft landing. It's a form of resistance against chaos, against rootlessness, against the lie that home is only what you're born into. And this is where place attachment theory becomes hopeful rather than nostalgic. Place attachment can happen at any point. It is not limited to childhood. You can develop an emotional connection to a place in your 40s, in your 70s, or in your last year of life. What matters is not the age at which the connection is formed, but the depth of that connection and what it comes to symbolize. Home can be a rented apartment where you finally felt safe. It can be a local coffee shop where the barista remembers your name. It can be a garden you tend alone, a porch swing, a library corner, a hotel room you return to every year just to feel whole again. These places aren't necessarily grand, but they are emotionally saturated. Emotionally saturated. They matter because they meet you where you are, not where you were supposed to be. In Lorelai's story, this is what eventually leads her to her own inn, the Dragonfly Inn. After the loss of the Independence Inn, she doesn't try to replace it outright. She doesn't look for a replica. Instead, she builds something new. With Suki by her side, she takes the risk of imagining a new space, one that is just as emotionally rich, just as full of life and love, but rooted in who she is now. That's the lesson here. Home isn't just the past. It can be a creative act of the present. It can reflect not just where you came from, but who you've become. And there's something incredibly healing about that, especially for those who carry wounds from earlier chapters. To create a new home later in life is to say, my story continues. I get to build something beautiful, even if I didn't begin with it. It's not easy. It requires intentionality, emotional labor, sometimes grief for what never was. But the possibility is there. And for many people, that possibility has saved them. What helps the process is recognizing the elements that make a memory home, not just the walls, but the rituals, the consistency, the sensory experiences, the people who saw you, the freedom to be unguarded. When those elements are consciously invited into a new space, the emotional imprint of home can begin to form again. Not overnight, but slowly, faithfully. And here's the most liberating truth of all. Sometimes you are allowed to outgrow the memory home of your past. Sometimes, even if it was meaningful, it no longer fits who you are now. And so the question becomes not just can I find home again, but can I become it? Because home at its deepest level is not just a place you go. It's a place you carry, a way you live, a quality of being. Because you deserve to feel at home in your life, even if no one taught you how, even if you've lost it before, even if it's taken longer than you thought. Now that we've explored what a memory home is and how its loss can disorient us, and the possibility of building one later, what does that actually look like? How can we reclaim a sense of home when memory feels distant or when you never had it to begin with? You start with meaning. Home is not built from square footage, expensive furniture, or even permanence. It's built from what matters. It's built from what feels true to you. And when we treat home as an emotional experience, rather than just a physical location, we begin to understand that it can be cultivated intentionally, like a garden, rather than something passively inherited. One of the most powerful tools in reclaiming a sense of home is ritual. Simple, repeated acts that anchor you. Making the same cup of tea every morning, playing music when you tidy up, lighting a candle at dusk. These aren't just routines. They are rituals that tell your nervous system, I am here. I am safe. I am held. They create continuity in a world that feels really fragmented right now. Another tool is memory preservation. If the place you called home no longer exists, find small ways to honor it. Write down stories from that space. Keep a photograph in your drawer. Cook a recipe you once made there, or smelled there, or helped your Nana make. The goal isn't to recreate the past. It's to keep its emotional truth alive, to remind yourself that what it gave you still belongs to you. You can also build home through people. Sometimes home is a person who listens without fixing, someone who looks at you and says, "You don't have to explain, I know." If you're lucky enough to have someone like that, nurture that connection. If you don't, start by becoming that person for yourself. It's also worth saying this: boundaries are part of home too. The right to close the door, to say no, to protect your peace. If your past was chaotic or invasive, part of reclaiming home is learning that you get to decide who enters and who doesn't. And if you've moved around a lot in life, if you've never stayed in one place long enough to form roots, know that roots can still grow in memory. Emotional consistency matters more than location. Even if your home is a small apartment, a room you rent, or a corner of a city that finally feels right, you can build meaning there. What matters is that you name it, that you say to yourself, "This is mine. I belong here. This is my home." And finally, give yourself permission to feel grief when home is lost. Whether it's a childhood house sold off, a neighborhood that changed, or a relationship that ended and took the feeling of home with it. Grieve it. Name it. That grief is not weakness. It's proof that something once mattered, and that's a beautiful thing. You are allowed to feel disoriented. You are allowed to miss something you can never return to. You are allowed to start over, not because you failed, but because you've grown. And as you grow, home will grow with you. So now let's return to the emotional heart of this episode, Lorelai's fear of losing her memory home, and I'll offer you a closing reflection for anyone who's ever carried that same ache, the ache of loving a place so deeply and having to let it go. When Lorelai tells Luke, "That was my memory home," she's saying something that goes deeper than nostalgia. She's giving voice to a fear so many of us carry. What if the place that held me disappears? What if there's no evidence left of who I used to be? What if I can't remember my grandparents? This is the tension we all face when the world around us changes faster than we can hold on to it. When homes are sold, places are shuttered, chapters close without ceremony, people die. It can feel like our memories become weightless, like we've lost our place in the world, like a part of us has gone missing. But here's the truth I want to leave with you. No place you loved, no moment that shaped you, no home that held you is ever really gone. Yes, the building, the elements, they might disappear. The people might move on. The neighborhood might become unrecognizable. But what those places gave you in that moment, that safety, that joy, that growth, that is yours. You carry it now. The memory home lives within you. And that means something extraordinary. It means you are the living continuation of the places that shaped you. You are the witness now. You are the keeper of the meaning. And because of that, you also have the power to create new spaces of belonging for yourself, for others, for the next version of you. Even if the inn is gone, Lorelai still carries what it gave her. She still remembers who she became there. And in the seasons that follow, we watch her create something new. A space that reflects who she is now, not just who she was then. That is the heart of resilience. Not moving on, but moving forward. With the past inside you, not behind you. So if you're listening today, and you've lost your memory home, if it's been taken, torn down, sold, or simply faded with time, I want you to know you are not alone. You are not untethered, and you are not too late. You can begin again. You can plant something sacred. You can call a space yours, and you can build a home. Not just out of walls and wood, but out of meaning, out of memory, out of love, out of a life fully lived. The memory home isn't something you go back to. It's something you carry forward. And no one can take that from you.
That wraps up this episode of The Psychology of Us with Professor RJ Starr. Each conversation is a step toward greater understanding of ourselves, each other, and the forces that shape human behavior. Listeners are invited to continue the conversation by sharing their thoughts, questions, and topic suggestions at profrjstarr@outlook.com. Every message helps shape future episodes, ensuring the discussions remain relevant, thought-provoking, and meaningful. For those who find value in these explorations, subscribing and leaving a review is a great way to support the podcast and bring these insights to a wider audience. Until next time, stay curious, stay thoughtful, and keep exploring the psychology of us.